to the Shop, episode 181, Organizational Self-Knowledge. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFurio. I'm your host for the show. Thank you so much for joining me today as we're talking about organizational self-knowledge, how to make that a reality in your organization, and why it's really, really important, especially in this day and age in coffee. So looking forward to talking with you about that. Now, if you haven't yet subscribed to Keys to the Shop, I would encourage you, please subscribe, and that way you'll never miss one of these episodes. You'll always be up to date. And don't forget to sign up to be on the email list for Keys to the Shop. Every week we send out the transcripts from each episode along with resources, and bonus audio as well. So that is over at keystotheshop.com. All you do is scroll down to the bottom of the page. You'll see a form, put your information in, and you're good to go. Now, this episode is brought to you by Prima Coffee, longtime supporter of Keys to the Shop and fantastic specialty coffee equipment suppliers, one of the world's best, in fact, and I've had the privilege of knowing them since the beginning of their company. Basically, they curate the best equipment they can find from all over the world and to bring it to you and help you fit it to your situation so that you get the right equipment for the job, whether that job is just making coffee in your kitchen or if you have a cafe and you need to outfit it with the best commercial equipment, or you're expanding or have multiple cafes, Prima Coffee can help you not only with grinders and espresso machines and things like that, but also with under-counter refrigeration. So that under the commercial equipment spectrum as well. So to start exploring what Prima has to offer, go to prima-coffee.com. Fantastic website where you're going to see just how much they have to offer. And also you're going to see that they're very generous with their knowledge of coffee and coffee equipment because they give you all sorts of blogs and videos as resources to help you learn how to use this equipment well. They just have a heart to help you make great coffee, and that's what I love about them. So go to prima-coffee.com, reach out to them over phone or email, and let them know that you heard about them on this show. Thank you so much, Prima, for your support of Keys to the Shop. This episode is also brought to you by the ever awesome Pacific Barista series, which I think is the world's best line of plant-based performance beverages that perform to a high standard for professional baristas. They are formulated for the professional barista and with heavy feedback from the barista community. That's why they perform so well on the bar. They can take the heat from the steaming process. The texture is amazing, easy to make latte art with, and the beverage will end up having a great balance where the flavor is focused on coffee, which is what we want here. So I know your customers are going to love it. I know you're going to love it. Go to pacificfoods.com to learn more. Get these in your shop and try it out for yourself. This is an awesome company that is such a great cheerleader for specialty coffee. These products are just a testimony to that fact. So again, pacificfoods.com, and thank you so much, Pacific, for creating these products and for supporting Keys to the Shop. Okay, so today we are going to be talking about organizational self-knowledge. And one of the things that I want to accomplish here is what I feel like I want to accomplish a lot in coffee, which is sort of a ability to take the step back and take a look at what we're doing. Examine what we're thinking and what's motivating our actions. We get on a treadmill in a way in coffee, and we just keep going and going and going. And sometimes we forget why we're doing what we're doing, and it's not productive, but we got to keep going. We get stubborn. We get sunk cost in that meaning that we put so much effort and energy into something that even if it's not producing results for us, we continue to do it because we just think of how much we paid for it in either money or time or pride or all three. And I think in the cafe that can easily happen when we start to sort of go down the road of our schedules are always sort of busy and we don't have time for self-reflection. And that leads to a lot of problems in your personal life as well as your professional life. And we've spoken to that on several occasions through self-care episodes, organizing your time and things like that, taking care of stress in the workplace, managing your emotions, things like that. But what we really haven't talked about that much, but is a logical extension of this, is the fact that we need self-reflection as an organization. And this podcast, I think, is one of the outlets that can be used to avoid doing that. And in past episodes, I've talked about the fact that there are lots of ways to sort of accumulate information as a way of avoiding taking action on information. I'm just as guilty as the next person. It's just like, how many books do you have in your library that make you feel good, but you have not read? I'm raising my hand here because I've got books in my library that I was really interested in, and some part of me was satisfied that I actually got that book. And it's like, I've already read it. Why do I need to read it now? Anyway, getting back to what we were talking about, I think that in this day and age in coffee, we have the ability to look to tons of different examples and case studies and icons in the coffee industry, businesses and individuals, and see what they're doing. What are their top 10? What are their top 5? What are their habits? What do they eat for breakfast? How do they work out? What do their expense reports look like? And things like that. You just go down the list, and you want that information because some part of us feels that there's a formula that has to work. This question gets asked a lot in different ways by people just starting out in coffee as they try to figure out, how many syrups should I have in my cafe? What's the right number of single origin options for me to have? And questions like that point to the idea that they assume there's an answer, a magic formula. Now, nobody would say it's magic. Nobody is going to be that extreme to say it's magic, but there's an assumption that if you get it right, you're going to see the rewards. Like it's a turnkey, like somebody is holding this information and it's just going to happen when you say, oh, you should start with 7 syrups, and that way you're going to be better off than if you had 8 or 6. And how does this play into what we're talking about today? I think if you are a business owner or thinking about becoming a business owner, what can happen, and what I think often happens, is that we look to other organizations for how they run their businesses, but we don't take a lot of time to think about what we're doing now in examining its fruitfulness and how effective it is, what its impact is on us and others. We might perceive that there's a problem. We might perceive that we need to, take the next level of iteration and growth. But when we think about that, we say, we got to grow the company. We need to grow so that we can provide more opportunity for our employees. Okay, that's kind of a self-aware thing to do. But what happens often is we look to other companies as examples first before examining truly what is happening within our own companies thoroughly. We just kind of automatically assume that if we go to successful companies and do what successful companies do, every single time it's going to work for us. Without self-knowledge as an organization, you can't apply anything appropriately. It's like you're collecting chess pieces, but you have no chessboard, right? You're not actually playing the game. You're just collecting the pieces. So in this episode, I think it's my goal to sort of give some, steps to, think about taking when you want to take the next step, when you want to, create something better in your organization. And the temptation is to go to somebody else rather than to try to mine the riches of your existing real estate. I'm talking about the business or the people, the relationships, all of that. So I think the first thing here is you need to have an attitude toward your staff and customers that your position as a leader is one of service to them, serving them in a sense of creating an opportunity for their success. In the customer's case, this is a successful visit to your coffee shop. That means they enjoy themselves. They get a great representation of your coffee things go well, they have glowing reviews, that's a success. Staff feel the same way about their experience working in your coffee bar. How you create that experience for them has a lot to do with whether or not you've provided them with enough money, enough communication, the tools to do their job. That we have a lot of episodes talking about this type of stuff, and I'll link to these in the show notes here as well. But I think the first thing here is have an attitude of humility when you're approaching getting to know your organization more. And it might sound weird to hear that phrase, like getting to know your organization more, because I would assume that nobody knows your organization as good as well as you do. But, let me give an illustration here about how that's not the case a lot of times. Because, you can, for instance, be married. Like I'm married, and it'll be 11 years pretty soon, like actually next week. It'll be 11 years married. And obviously, everybody says, boy, it doesn't seem like that long. But when you're married, and especially if you've got a busy life, you can be in the same house and working with somebody for a long time and next to them and around them and assume that you know them, but you actually don't, because you're not making time to get to know them. You're not making time to serve them and to be curious about them as a person. There's just sort of an assumption about, because of my proximity to the individual, that equals knowledge. The same is true, I think, for business. You could be working in your business and not know it very well, not know the people in it very well, or what holds it together, what makes it tick, because it's just busy, go all the time. If you're not taking the time for self-reflection, then you're not going to be able to take proper action. And I say that because the first step, humility, applies there as well. You know that you can have a tendency to lose touch with what's going on in your business and to take it for granted, and the people in it that you know, and that they don't need you to be curious and they don't need you to be engaged. As overused a word as that is, engagement of employees. That's why humility is the number one here in terms of organizational self-knowledge. Don't just assume that because you're there, you know. We always have to be curious and discovering, because the organism of your organization is constantly fluctuating as the intersection of your staff and your customers just changes year after year. So that's number one. So you're in service to your staff and your customers. Be humble and get curious about them and what makes them tick. Number two is tactical, following up on that, and that is to interview your staff. I do a lot of interviews, and in these interviews, I like to pry into people's lives and try to get from them things that you as the listener can use in your business, of course. Also, I want to hear about what makes them tick. And stories are really amazing, and they help you sort of relate to that person, and creates a permission in your mind to allow that person to speak into your life. You know them more, then you have an easier time trusting their words. This is why it's important to interview your staff. You have people who you've interviewed before they worked for you. And now that they work for you, all it is small talk behind the bar. And if you're not a barista and you're a manager, or you're a GM or an owner, you have barely the opportunity to really get to know people. So when they voice their opinion, it's hard for you to take what they say as seriously, because you actually don't know them. When you get to know your staff, you sort of give yourself permission to be more receptive to the things that they tell you, and you get to appreciate them more as well. I want to know about people's lives, and I'm not talking about like a formal interview process, but a curiosity that, asks questions of people and, discovers things about them as a person. Get to know them more than just their position and saying, hey, as you walk by. If you interview your staff if you get curious, kind of like the way I would with a guest, and have like follow-up questions and really be engaged in that process, I think you're going to find you're not only open to what they say more, they're going to be more open to what you say and do as well. So that is a huge portion of what organizational self-knowledge is all about. And it's key, again, because when you are about to make a decision to change something in your company, now it's not just these nameless faces or just these pieces on a board that you're thinking about. It's people that you know. You're less likely to make rash decisions when it comes to the business because its impact is going to impact people that you're familiar with now. So let's move on to number 3. Number 3 is to develop and celebrate everyday skills. This is really important because we live in a time in coffee where the people on stage are the ones who are blowing minds. We're all about like mind-blowing things and just amazing skills that people demonstrate in situations that are not necessarily everyday situations. But there are lots of things that baristas do and staff do every day that need to be celebrated and recognized and cultivated. When you develop people's skills in everyday things, we're talking about developing skills in cleaning as you work, developing skills like following through on what you say you're going to do, developing the skill of having an effective meeting, just the nuts and bolts of everyday business and everyday service. When you're focused on developing and celebrating everyday skills in the bar, you are reinforcing the lifeblood of the cafe, and you're kind of avoiding the trap that a lot of places fall into, which is to take for granted those everyday skills and then give all of the praise to the people who are on the stage or that one superstar barista or whatever. We need to make sure that we are balanced in the way that we are perceiving our businesses, and doing this, focusing in on those everyday skills and celebrating them the way that you would do if you saw somebody pour an amazing piece of latte art or do a great run of their barista routine. This is going to really fortify what retail coffee is all about. I think, not to get on too much of a soapbox, but we have put so many resources into competition, and not only just financial resources, but also emotional and attention resources. We have not just money to spend on our staff, but we also have attention to spend. We also have time to spend. And those are very valuable commodities that will reinforce what's valuable to the company. And if you're not reinforcing the foundational skills and everyday skills with your time and attention, then those are the first things that are going to erode in the coffee. And you might end up with baristas who place high value on competitive aspects of barista work, or fringe aspects of barista work. And then customers end up complaining because the basics are left unattended to, because you kind of left them unattended to yourself by not developing and celebrating them every day. So let's move on to number 4. This one is really something that is a through line for a lot of our episodes, and that's soliciting feedback. This is feedback as a way of life. And this is a shift break that we actually did called Developing a Culture of Feedback. Link to that again in the show notes. But soliciting feedback should just be a way of life. You don't know your organization well if you haven't had a lot of conversations on a regular basis with the people who work in the coffee shop day in and day out. You can't pretend to know your shop that well. If you do, you're deluding yourself. You really are. And you're going to make decisions and lose people, and you're going to wonder why, and you're going to blame it on, well, it's hard to find good help and stuff like that. But in the end, it's a lot of it's just because there's this communication gap. Nobody's really interested in what the barista thinks, or it gets blown off or it gets forgotten about because it's not prioritized. Most of the time when people forget about things that baristas say or do, it's because they are either unorganized or they don't really value what they have to say. Because I guarantee you, if I said something to you and you were paying me money as a consultant to say it, you're going to take it more seriously because you spent that money. You know, that's just part of the way we operate as people. I would do the same thing. But knowing that, I think we need to self-generate urgency in those conversations. We need to say, look, these baristas, I'm actually paying them to work here, but their words are valuable, and I need to generate urgency within myself to take what they have to say seriously, to take what my manager has to say seriously. For most coffee shops where problems arise in the ranks or in the foundation of their business, the writing was on the wall a long time ago, and they just didn't bother to read it or take it seriously. So soliciting feedback has to be part of how you develop organizational self-knowledge, or else you're going to be cut off from the life source of your business, and that is the user experience, the customers, and your staff. Now, number 5, keep tight operational standards, but do it in a down-to-earth way. This is so critical for coffee, and I just can't express how disheartened I get when I see people try to apply standards to the coffee bar that really just browbeat their staff. They are like taskmasters, and they want to take it seriously because a lot of their money is tied up in this, and they're really scared to lose all they have. And so that fear translates into severity, and that severe tone is almost like the accusation of having done something wrong without having done anything wrong. And I know we've worked for people where it's like you just start out with this tone of just like, we'll see, you probably will steal from me, or you'll probably, do something wrong. And if you do, here are the consequences. And it's sort of like a culture of punishment for future actions that have, future crime. Tom Cruise coming in a Minority Report for, something you didn't do on the closing shift yet, but you're gonna do because the Oracle saw it, So here's the thing. Tight operational standards and SOPs, love it. Having great checklists, holding people accountable, I love all of that. But you have to understand that the coffee bar is no matter who you are, I'm trying to find the right words to say here, but it is a way more relational, professional environment than corporate places or even professional restaurants and things like that. That is not to say it is a lack of standards environment or an easy job, but I think that you need to marry these high standards and high expectations with a down-to-earth way of being and coaching and speaking about these things. That means figuring out whether or not you are being severe. Now, just a second ago, we were talking about soliciting feedback. This applies to you too. You need to solicit feedback about how you come off to people, because you might be coming off as very over the top and very, severe, and you don't know it. So even though standards are absolutely critical, you need to be able to apply them as a human being with grace, with humility, and yes, with consistency, yes, with firmness, but also with a body of evidence in both your tone and your track record in looking out for their best interest. So this is, I think, something I see tripping people up. It goes back to the formula thing I was talking about before, which is because we feel like there's this right way to do things, any kind of hiccup or speed bump will derail this very delicate, house of cards that we've built, of 7 syrups, and you have to be out of the cafe 20 minutes after close, or I'm going to go out of business, stuff like that. There is no wiggle room in there because we're operating from the wrong mindset. And there's more wiggle room than you think. You can be a human being. You can be a good a person who is relatable and also hold people accountable to high standards. And as you do that, you're going to go into number 6, and that is ask yourself the question, how does what I'm about to do, or how do these standards, how do these lists help the staff do their job better and relieve their frustrations with what they've been given to work with? These are the questions you ask yourself, because as you ask yourself these questions, you have to search for the answer. And searching for the answer means relating to the work, empathizing with, getting to know, and learning about the struggles that people have. That is organizational self-knowledge. And it gives you a greater sense of what's going on, as Stan Slapp says, under the hood. So number 6, asking yourself the question, how does this, this could be replaced with, how does this policy change? How does this checklist? How does this SOP? How does this email, this meeting, whatever, help the staff do their job better, have a better experience in your shop, serve the customer better, relieve their frustrations? How does this serve is a great way to sum it up. And you have to answer that question if you really want to have if you really want to have a knowledge of your business. And the last thing here to think about when it comes to organizational self-knowledge is that as you get to know things a little bit more deeply than what you assumed you already knew, I think it's going to slow you down just a tad, probably just the right amount to keep you from making a foolish decision that will prove to lose you employees or business or something like that. It's a thoughtful way of creating growth, or a thoughtful way of creating opportunities. And that's the last thing I wanted to share here, which is that it's not so much about making big changes. It's about making small, thoughtful changes over time. Now, the question is, okay, we said thoughtful. What are you thinking about? Well, small, thoughtful changes over time means you're thinking about the user experience. The people using your business are your staff, your customers. So making a small change to the way a shaker works, getting a different shaker on the bar because people keep complaining about how it's, coming out too fast. Get one that regulates the flow better. Fix a problem here and there. Make that a way of being, taking care of little things all the time. It causes you to think about the business all the time. It causes you to get to know it a little bit more each time you make a thoughtful, small change. I'll tell you, I would rather work for an organization that makes small, thoughtful changes consistently over time than allows the staff and the place to just go without these changes and to just have to survive for a very long time until we make broad sweeping changes are made in one fell swoop. Because by that time, people will just kind of be a little bit more bitter toward the situation. So all in all, having self-knowledge of your organization, I think, is going to inspire you to make small, thoughtful changes more frequently than to withhold change and then just make it one big campaign in one fell swoop, which I don't think is nearly as effective as the former. So with all of these 7 things to think about, I think that we need to come back to the first premise of this conversation. And that is that we have the tendency to overlook what's right underneath our nose because we assume that we know it deeply and that we have to look outside of our organizations for growth, for insight, for things like that. And by no means do I think that you should not find insight or knowledge outside of your shop. I mean, why am I doing this podcast if that was the case? I just think that there should be an attitude of first things first. And just like, you can be with somebody in proximity to them for a long period of time and not know them, the same thing is true for your business. And I'm sure there's lots of other things we could talk about, are some great places to start when it comes to having some organizational self-knowledge. When you get there, when you get a little bit more acquainted with and in good terms with and have more rapport with your organization, when you take in podcasts, books, talks, things like that, when you do that, then you're going to know where to put that information in the construct of your business, and it will fit a lot better that way. I can't buy shoes for myself if I don't know what size my feet are. I'll just go through too many shoes and I'll get frustrated. I'll just go barefoot. I don't care. The same thing applies to your business. So I promise no more analogies. Sorry. But I hope that this episode was helpful for you. I would encourage you to get the transcript by signing up to the email list over at keystotheshop.com. Of course, as always, you can email me. Chris@keystotheshop.com is my email address. If you have questions or comments about this episode, if you want to hire Keys to the Shop Consulting to help you maybe with your organizational self-knowledge or assessment of your cafe, training of your staff, or whatever project is heavy on your mind right now that you might need some assistance with, please do reach out at that same email address, chris@keystotheshop.com. It'd be a pleasure to work with you. Now, of course, I want to draw your attention to the upcoming Coffee Fest coming up in Tacoma, Washington. Coffee Fest Pacific Northwest, the 15th and the 16th of November. And I'll be there judging latte art and speaking. I would hope to see you there. It's one of the best places to be if you're a coffee retailer and you want to gain some knowledge and you want to be with a community of like-minded people who are trying to grow their businesses and start off on the right foot. This is a great place to do just that. Go to coffeefest.com and click on the Coffee Fest Pacific Northwest tab and find out more information about what's going on there at that show, and hope to see you there. Now, also, you might have seen over on Instagram, and if you're not following Keys to the Shop on Instagram, I would love it if you'd follow us on Instagram. That would be awesome. It's just at Keys to the Shop over there. But I am going to be co-hosting an event for cafe leaders with the great Ildi Revi over at Ally Coffee. This is for their community of practice for cafe leaders. It's for managers and head baristas. It's all about how to successfully orchestrate the aspects of the coffee business, maintain your passion for coffee, inspire your staff and customers. This is a great place for community to be, with other people in coffee leadership. And we're going to have a great 2 days of lectures and discussions, presentations, and events. You're not going to want to miss that. I will provide a link to this in the show notes. That's in Greenville, South Carolina. That's taking place December 27th and the 28th over in Greenville, South Carolina, Ally Coffee's headquarters. So I encourage you to go sign up for that. It's a great price for this course, a lot of value here. And hopefully I'll see you in that class as well. Great way to end the year and kind of start the new one. And that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that this has really inspired you to take action to get to know your organization in a deeper way. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.